Welcome to Bootleg Like Jazz. Bootleg Like Jazz is a listener-supported podcast. Consider supporting us at www.bootleglikejazz.com. Welcome to the Bootleg Like Jazz podcast. I am your host, Q. Today on the show, I want to talk a little bit about voting. It is no secret, May 2020, here we are, that who is the Democratic presidential nominee? Joe Biden. I am a Bernie lover supporter. There you go, right? But we need to, those who do have progressive, independent interests and so forth, I think we do need to think outside the box. Recently, Axios published an article talking about Joe Biden's Lift Every Voice plan. And I want to dive into it. In the headlines, Sean Puffy Combs, Diddy, right? He talking about holding his vote hostage. You know what? I agree. Why are we always voting out of fear? Huh? Do federal elections matter? Do local and state elections matter more? It's a complicated quagmire of conversations, questions, discussions, and debates. You can go to leading experts and they'll tell you that, right? But they can't inspire anybody to go to the polls. You can go and try to talk to celebrities or prominent business figures. Though they are cool, though people are interested in them, even those people and the people they know vote differently and think differently. I don't know. You've got to make that decision for yourself if you believe your vote matters or not. But us here at Bootleg Like Jazz, we believe in being informed about all that is going on and making a decision. And yes, being civically engaged is important. Charlemagne on the Breakfast Club radio show also supported Diddy. And he talked about Joe Biden needs to have a black agenda. And he's correct. Between the crack law legislation that he was a part of, as well as the 94 crime bill and many other things, in addition to the wave of support he got recently in the Carolinas, is proof that he must address and be held accountable to reaching back and supporting this base of Black Americans. And also to a large extent as well, Afro-Latin and Latino, Latinx Americans as well. We need to have these conversations and we must move forward. I was recently watching this show about a prominent entrepreneur African-American woman in history, Madam C.J. Walker. And they were talking a lot about these principles of financial education and literacy more than 100 years ago that we are talking about now. And the funny thing is, sometimes for me, and I know other times for others, those things seem like the first time we've heard them. My point is, planting the seeds of ideas and change does take time. With that said, we want to know, what is the Black agenda? What is the Latino, Afro, Latinx, Latino, whatever agenda? What is the agenda for the people who have been marginalized in this country? We need to also have a conversation about holding our vote hostage and if that is the right course of action. Hey, listen, pretty much right now it's Biden and Trump, right? Similar to last time. I don't like it no more than you. But here we are. A few things we can look at are some of the things that have happened since his presidency, since his administration, the policies, the current pandemic that we are in. And I personally advocate and say this pandemic does not reach the heights that it reaches if the Democratic candidate won the last election. Why? I do not believe that that infrastructure would have been wiped away. I do not believe that. So, as you could tell, the black agenda and what Joe Biden wants to do if he wins this presidency, and what also for Trump, but we know what to expect with him. We want to know what is that. And so a few days ago, Axios published this article about Lift Every Voice that the Biden campaign is suggesting for Black America. And I want to read you a few of the things. It's called Lift Every Voice. And this is Axios.com. The headline kind of reads, first, they're going to address hate crimes. Okay. All right. Next, they want to allocate $900 million to fight gun violence and how that affects the communities. And they want to have better access relief funds for African Americans during coronavirus. That's kind of like, clickbait information. But the key points that they dive into is that he would, obviously all of this depends on him being elected, taking it and being sworn in, right? But he wants to instruct the Justice Department to address, talk, and deal with hate crimes. I say it must go further to looking at police brutality. The plan calls for more funding for the Small Business Administration to allow the agency to better support African-American owned small businesses. It also calls for more federal contracting opportunities for African-American owned businesses. And that's real. But the first sentence, better support African-American owned small businesses. What about the people who have an idea, who can see it through, and who need that support? Huh? Biden plans to invest $1 billion per year in juvenile justice reform. Waste of money. You know where it needs to go? Ding, ding, ding. Public education. You deal with public education, you don't need as much money in a criminal justice reform. That is actually, it's putting a Band-Aid on the wound instead of treating the wound. That's a big deal. We need to talk about public education. We need to talk about trauma. We need to talk about standardized tests. We need to talk about money. We need to talk about food deserts. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The last point that they have in here, the plan would also ensure political appointees, including the president's cabinet, look like the country. So basically tokenism, right? Basically, we're going to represent but not give you power. This is a start. Let's start here. How I suggest we modify and work through it, I believe we can come to an agreement with others. But like I said, Small Business Administration, we need to make a route, avenue, resources, capital for people who have ideas that are bankable. So the language there needs to be fixed a bit. We also need to dive into something that he didn't put on here that he needs to address. We need to look at non-violent crimes. We need to look at marijuana, cannabis, call it what you want. The fact of the matter remains, black folks are voting for you. White folks are making money off of cannabis while black folks and Latinos are still locked up. Bruh, man, you got to do something about that. From descheduling it to starting a referendum to starting a committee or investigation or whatever, something needs to be done. This is criminal to allow this industry to flourish where it is, predominantly by whites, and in some places like Colorado, if you've been locked up for that and it was nonviolent and a low way, you can't work in the industry. WTF. Bruh, man, we got to do something about that. And I know the real bruh man was black, but you understand what I'm trying to say, right? Then we also do need to talk about hate crimes, right? We recently saw in Michigan. Listen, this is privilege. This is a perfect definition and example of privilege, white privilege. Walk into a state building, a governmental building, armed, protesting the folks who work there. And by the way, is this only happening in places where there's Democratic governors? Something needs to be talked about and dealt with it, right? And really what we're talking about is implicit bias, right? Is this idea that they will look at those people differently than if their skin tone was darker, more kissed by the sun. WTF, right? Come on. This is privilege at its finest. There's no way in the world Black or Latino folks, Brown Berets, Black Panthers, they did it. Some were killed, others were locked up. If America is to be true to who she or he says that they are on paper, something needs to be done. We must address this pandemic as well. And then wrapping up, political appointees are good, but listen, if you're just putting people there with no other impact that they're going to have, we don't want that. We don't need that. What we need is change. What we need is opportunities. What we need is doors being open. And not to mention, listen, Joe Biden, tell you right now, bro, if you put into your Black agenda that you will make sure that a full referendum conversation on a congressional aspect or whatever happens about reparations and how to make the community of Black folks better, and you follow through, a change of power can definitely happen in 2020. Hey, if these stories resonate with you, please follow, subscribe, leave a comment, whether good, bad, or ugly, and use the hashtag BLLJ.